Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Taylosive EV live on YouTube. Feels good to say that. Basically, in case you weren't aware, during my last live stream, which was right before the Q3 or Q4 earnings call, I had to take off. I went on a surprise trip with my wife, and that's why the video backgrounds have been different for the past couple videos. But I finally got back, and whoa, I'm hearing myself. Oh, I know why. Man, there was this weird stuff going on with Twitter. It wasn't letting me send out the tweet that I was going live. Um, I don't know what you're doing, Elon, but it claimed that I had reached my daily tweet limit, and I haven't tweeted in over a day. But I guess I've been tweeting too much. Very weird bug. Anyway, yeah, we've gotten a Tesla Investor Day invite image. That's the thumbnail of this live stream. Which I checked the calendar, and lo and behold, only 3 weeks to go until Investor Day officially begins. And I thought it was a really cool invite image. We had a bunch of side stamped pieces of the Model Y, and I saw Sandy Monroe kind of break down his explanation of that cryptic. I mean, they were saying it was hard to figure out what it was. I noticed the Model Y stamping piece the second I saw it, but they deducted that if you do the math on how many there are, just by the size of the image and how many stamping pieces are stacked together in that image, it ends up, when you factor in the thickness of it and all that, it's like 2 million Model Ys, or 1.9 million or something like that. So their thought process on it was essentially that they tweeted out how many Model Ys they plan on building in 2023, or I guess just vehicles in total, which is close to 2 million, which I like the design of it overall. Unfortunately, I did not get an invite, but it seems like a lot of people have still not gotten invites that are the type of people that typically would. So it may be one of those last minute type things. I just hope we don't run into another situation kind of like what happened with the Tesla Semi event, where they send out invites to certain people like the Kilowatts, and then, oh, thank you for the support, Mersey. Very excited for Investor Day. Yeah, we got not too long to go. But they send out invites to certain people in the Twitter, Tesla space, and Tesla YouTube community, and then they got turned down as they showed up to the event. They were like, nope, you cannot be here. And it was like, well, why did you send me the invite in the first place? And Omar from Omar's catalog also couldn't go. So it ended up being a very last second, actually you can't make it, which was a huge bummer. I don't know why. I don't know if that had something to do with Pepsi themselves or anything like that, but my hope is that Investor Day can mostly be about production. I am concerned that, Elon said that Master Plan Part 3 would be announced or unveiled at this event, but I saw people on Twitter bringing this up, like Master Plan Part 2 isn't really done yet, which is why it kind of feels a bit premature. Where was it? I had a list of it up earlier, but basically Master Plan Part 2 was expand Tesla's lineup to cover all major segments, which I don't really think anyone can say that's been achieved, considering the Cybertruck's not even out yet. And even then, I don't think the Sexy lineup, the Semi, and the Cybertruck, does that count as all major segments? I feel like the most notable omission would probably be the van. A lot of vans are on the road, and there's still no Tesla van or anything like that. But I guess a lot of people are correct in assuming that it's well, okay, you can still be working on Master Plan Part 2 while you're working on Master Plan Part 3. But another part of it was to make a full self-driving suite that was 10 times... Yeah, here it is. In short, Master Plan Part 2... create stunning solar roofs with seamlessly integrated battery storage. Yeah, okay. I mean, they are stunning, but also not being deployed at the scale likely that they were hoping. Developing a self-driving capability that is 10 times safer than manual via massive fleet learning. I would say they're on their way. There's definitely a lot of fleet learning going on, but I don't know if I could say it's at the point that it's 10 times safer than manual. And then enable your car to make money for you when you aren't using it. That's definitely not a thing. Well, maybe we should count Turo, right? The car doesn't opt itself into Turo, but there's certainly a lot of people that make money off of their cars when they're not using them. They're not doing that through full self-driving, that's for sure. Um, but yeah, we've got a ways to go until we're 10 times safer. I would say probably at this point we can't even say we're as safe as the average human driver, because there's still we still have to monitor the self-driving systems with people. If it was safer than people, then we wouldn't need to monitor them in the first place. um, Tim Watson says, any chance Highland Model 3 will be ready for delivery immediately after the event, given the test mule sighting on the road? Ooh, I didn't even consider that, actually. Now that you bring it up, I guess that's not impossible, but I don't know. The thing I'm still theorizing is like, uh there's not been, as far as we're aware, it's pretty well known when Tesla shuts down an assembly line for something. Like, we knew before they refreshed the Model S and X with the yoke and the landscape center display and all that. We knew that the Model S and X assembly line was going to be down for upgrades. We didn't know how major the upgrades were, but we heard that they were going to shut down the assembly line. And we haven't heard anything like that for Model 3, as far as we're aware, and there's definitely a lot of employees that more than likely would leak something if the Model 3 line had been shut down for pretty big upgrades. I guess there's a chance maybe Highland is not that big an upgrade, but if you're going off of the rumors, right, because there was a Reuters report about Project Highland, which was refreshing the Model 3, technically in that exact same report where you got the term Highland, they said that it would launch in China first and that it wouldn't be seen until the third quarter of 2023. So if you want to go off of the rumors, that doesn't sound likely. So I'm going to guess no, that's not what this is. But I do think you bring up an interesting point about, if Tesla refreshes a lower end model or introduces a cheaper model, which they said Investor Day would discuss the third generation platform, which is more about scale. And in earnings calls, they've referenced it as that platform has to be half the price to build as a Model 3 or Y and require half the factory footprint in order to build twice as many vehicles. It's all of this doubling effect. How do we output production at a higher volume than Model 3 and Y even? So with that being the case, you can't really like rush it. You can't like not rush it, but you can't like announce it and then wait many months, because that's gonna affect definitely gonna affect present day sales, and we can see by the prices of the Model 3 dropping. Sorry, I hate to brag a little bit, but I was kind of right in my video. Like, in several videos prior, I did the Model 3 may get even cheaper, and that ended up happening after I posted that video. Yes, only $500 cheaper, but depending on the demand for Model Y and the sales for Model 3, there's a decent chance that I think Model 3 prices will continue to go up. And then I did my video on Model Y price increases coming, because they just updated the tax credit to include all Model Ys. They don't need to be under 55K anymore. And then I feel like 12 hours or so after I posted that video, they increased the Model Y price by like $1,500. And considering that current Model Y inventory is at an all-time low, personally, I think Model Y prices will probably continue to go up as long as inventory is down like this, because I don't think it's in Tesla's best interest to have a 6-month to 12-month wait time on new Model Ys. That's not good logistics-wise. I mean, it's good on one hand to be like, wow, look how much demand we have. Oh my God, you can't even get a Model Y. People are flipping them. They're so high in demand. But at the same time, they've said themselves on earnings calls, like, we don't want it to take this long. And it's kind of dangerous to ask for a certain price of a vehicle and you're not going to build that vehicle for 6 months to a year. You don't know what the price of lithium, nickel, or steel or anything is going to be at that point. So it's in Tesla's best interest to not have a huge wait time, in my view, especially for servicing vehicles. If someone gets totaled and they want to replace their car with a new one, if they have to wait 6 months, that's not good either. So I feel like Model Y prices are probably going to keep going up. And if demand for Model 3 doesn't change, it will probably see further price cuts. Or if anything, they could just bring back the long range. I don't know why they haven't done that yet. definitely a long way off from part 2 being anywhere near fully achieved. I agree. Probably do not want to Osborne with a new model, so lower cost to produce Model 3 would be available soon after. I think the biggest things that would save cost on production are single piece castings. And we'd probably know from Hydra or from Tesla if they installed new gigapresses. Those are very big, very large, very obvious. You can't really sneak that into the factory overnight. So, anyway, they could leverage Model Y castings for Model 3. Nah, not really. They're, as far as I'm aware, that's not how that works. The castings are kind of designed to build a very specific component. And even so, maybe you're right, and there is a way to just switch over a casting to building some other different part. But even so, like the Giga castings at Fremont are going around the clock full speed to build as many Model Ys as possible because Model Y is more profitable and it's their best seller. They've got more demand for that than any other Tesla. So I don't think they would stop producing Model Y parts with existing gigapresses, which again, I don't think you can just switch over a gigapress to build Model 3 castings that easily. But yeah, the 7,000-pound casting machine that was sent to China, also crickets. Yeah, I have not heard any further updates on that either. It was cool to get some light Cybertruck info. Was that last week? Yeah, I did that video where we saw the updated side view mirrors and we saw them actually loading tires into the back. I think that was the first time I actually saw a Cybertruck like moving things, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, you wouldn't, if you are planning on introducing a vastly cheaper car, you wouldn't want to announce that and then wait 12 months because Model 3 demand is already not that great. So if you tell people that like a cheaper compact Tesla is coming next year, that's obviously going to kill Model 3 sales even more so, which Tesla doesn't want. So my theory is that Investor Day is not going to necessarily announce a brand new model. But they'll talk a lot about the manufacturing approaches that will go into the new model. They'll just say they'll keep it vague, kind of like the Tesla Semi event was incredibly vague, and they didn't go into much detail with it. They were just kind of like, it has long range, 500 miles of range. What's the payload capacity? What's the price? Does it have autopilot? Are you still doing convoy mode? What happened to armored glass? We don't know. That's all speculation. A lot of people pretend to know. They go, oh no, if they got rid of armored glass. How do you know? Because they didn't talk about it. Or did they keep it and just not want to talk about it? It's up for debate basically. Which things they kept in the Semi and which things they didn't keep in the Semi. But actually, fun note on that: they sent the Tesla Semi to I think it was Phoenix, Arizona, which it's there right now. And oh yeah, Tesla tweeted, by the way, that the event will be live streamed on YouTube if you're curious about Investor Day. But it's basically going to be outside the place where the Super Bowl is. I'm not a football guy, so I don't know anything about the Super Bowl, but I'm just interested that they were able to bring, let me pull this article up. It's kind of interesting. Let's see, it made it all the way to Glendale, Arizona. I'm curious, like, can it do that on a single charge? Or did they charge it out there somehow? Like, where did they charge this thing? But I guess it's like free advertisement for them. But it could have been hauling equipment for events of the Super Bowl experience, which include or not immediately available to respond. But this is definitely one of the very few Frito-Lay Tesla semis that was at the delivery event. I don't know, like, why did they not need to move actual chips and stuff from the Frito-Lay facility? Why are they comfortable going way out in downtown Glendale? I don't know. Maybe it's being used or something. But yeah, usually the Super Bowl is when Tesla gets a bunch of free advertising from all their competitors. So I guess Tesla was like, let's just drive it there and then people will talk about it. Or people will know. It's just a PR thing. Not that really... Does Tesla care about PR at the end of the day? I'm not... I'm not convinced they do. But at least we know where they long-term plan on ramping the Semi. We know that it's in low volume production right now. I was still kind of bummed that they didn't want to report how many Tesla Semis have been delivered. My guess is it's very, very low numbers, so that's why it wasn't reported. But one of these days, they gotta bring it up because they report Model S and X deliveries, they report Model 3 and Y deliveries. But kind of surprised how much Tesla is promoting the base model lease option for the Model 3. I guess because it's just such an insanely low starting price, but $350 a month to lease a Model 3, which other people were pointing out on Twitter. This is like cheaper than leasing a lot of like Toyota Camrys or Honda Civics, and of course factor in the cost of gas. And this is even cheaper. So yeah, honestly, like a really tempting option, I'm sure, for a lot of people. But I guess not enough, because just a few days ago, it's like the first thing you see on the website when you go to Tesla.com. The first thing is Model 3, $350 a month. And I think that's because they've cut the prices on the Model 3 and they're still not really happy with how many people are ordering for them. I'm kind of surprised by that personally. As a Model 3 rear-wheel drive owner, I think this car is amazing. I love it. And I would still absolutely take this over a Model Y if I could do the whole thing again. And I just think that the prices have never been lower. They're great. And I feel like sedans are underrated in general. Like crossovers get a lot of hype and excuse me. Let's see. Funny how traditional dealership can change prices on cars day to day, customer to customer, and to meet month-year goals. National news if Tesla increases by $1,000. That's true. I guess we've never really had... Sorry, I'm choking on something. Should have brought my water in here. Jeez. I guess we've never had like a vehicle price that was so fixed over such a large market, right? Like all of the United States basically has the same price. There's difference in sales tax and you know, rebates and credits and that depending on where you live, but the purchase price is equal for the most popular vehicle basically in the country. As Model Y, I think, was 4th best selling globally. I'm sure it's not outselling, you know, pickup trucks and stuff, but it is in the top 10 most popular like single model units, and it's growing unlike all the other vehicles which are shrinking in sales. So that's why I say like Model Y is, you know, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's like the most popular vehicle. And whereas all those other vehicles on the best-selling list are constantly changing, like you said, depending on the dealer and what they mark it up for. So I guess now that we can just say one price and we all kind of agree to that price, no matter if you're in California, Florida, or Maine, all major states. Yeah, I guess that makes it easier to talk about, or it's easier to post in the news. I saw that Ford was lowering prices on the Mach-E to try to be competitive with the Model Y, but the price cuts I saw were not very drastic. Like, especially on the entry-level Mach-E's, the price went down like $500. I think on the performance, like the GT Mach-E, it went down by like almost $6,000, but still, that's not much compared to Tesla dropping prices by like $13,000, and then after that they qualify for the tax credit. That's like a massive change in affordability. And we're talking about like there was $13,000 knocked off of the base model, whereas the entry-level Mach-E's is just like a grand or two. Let's see. Miller Aces says, I got a Model Y last year, wasn't very impressed, so I sold it. I then realized how much I missed the user experience I had that I went back and bought another one. Love the Y. Interesting. Wow, I've never heard that kind of story before. Bought it, didn't like it, sold it, realized you did like it. So you had to buy it twice to be convinced. Well, good for you. Yeah, honestly, it's good to be back from my trip, although I didn't miss the cold. I don't live in a very cold climate, but still, it gets a lot colder here than it does where I was in Florida. It was like 70, 80 degrees every day. We were swimming, we were at the beach, and I was wearing shorts and flip-flops and all that. And then we come home, and it's super cold. Thankfully, though, we have a car that is good in the cold here. But yeah, this was the longest I'd ever gone without driving my Tesla, was this trip, because obviously we flew, so I couldn't drive it. And felt like a brand new car coming home yesterday. I got in and I was just like, oh, wow, this seat is so comfortable. Oh, my gosh. And there's air conditioning. Like, I was driving a 52-year-old Mercedes while I was there, and did a whole video on that on Talos of Life if you want to check it out, but not an EV, so it's not going to be talked about much here. But needless to say, it was a very old, very dated vehicle that was not fun to drive, and it was hard to live with. And getting back in this car has just, it's almost like that feeling I got when I first bought the Tesla. Like, I got that all over again. Everything feels so new and clean. I was like, oh, there's no key, there's no ignition. I just get in and I go. And even though I'm on chill mode, I'm on chill mode in this car on the slowest Tesla. And just, I was driving over to a family member's house for dinner, and I just kind of pushed the accelerator a little bit because on the old Mercedes I was driving, it was so slow. We timed it. The 0 to 60 time was like 30 seconds or something crazy like that. I got it back in this car, and I was used to kind of accelerating a bit quicker, and then it just picked up. It glides. It's so light. And I was just, and I was like, whoa, oh my God, I forgot I'm driving an EV. I can go really fast now. And I was not going fast. This is chill mode, slowest Tesla. And it still felt so much faster than the Mercedes. And, I just missed so much of this car. I missed the wireless chargers. I missed the cup holders. The old Mercedes didn't have the cup holders. And even today, like, it was like coming back to work type mentality. I was like, ooh, what do I do first? Oh, if I live stream, I could do it from the car, and that way I can hang out in the Tesla again, because I love hanging out in here. Honestly, it's kind of a bummer I don't drive it more because I do work from home. But we have lots of big road trips coming up later this year, which I'm excited for, where I get to drive it a lot. But yeah, seriously, it's just such comfortable seats. Such a great experience having the navigation right there on the display, doing everything through the screen. Some people don't like it. I love it personally. And we got some updates. Like, there's different heating levels. I updated my car while I was in Florida, which was kind of cool. And I was even like pressing the fart button. So like 3,000 miles away, and I can still make it fart. But I got an update while I was gone, and now when I go into HVAC settings, I get to decide how hot I want the heated steering wheel, which I didn't realize you could do. And you can set it to auto, so it will dynamically change the temperature depending on how cold it is inside the car, which was really cool. But yeah, I understand the user experience thing. That's like, I try to be not objective, but I try to be reasonable. Like, I think there's a lot of hyperbole mentalities towards Tesla, where they're just like, oh yeah, robotaxis are coming and they're going to take over the world, and bot is coming and it's going to replace the labor force, and Elon says we need universal basic income because Tesla bot is going to steal all our jobs. And I'm like, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. I think robotaxis are a way more complicated software suite than Tesla realizes, and they have consistently missed their timelines on that for years and years and years. So that's why I don't feel bad. I'm still a Tesla shareholder. I'm not like betting that they're gonna fail. I think Tesla is set up for great success. It's just not going to be as crazy high revenue wise as people think. But at the same time, with all of my trying to be reasonable and trying to manage expectations, like, I think the first Cybertruck is going to be way more expensive than people expect, and I think the range is going to be way lower than people want. With all that, I still think Tesla is basically going to have a monopoly on the EV space, particularly because of the charging network. But also, yeah, the user experience is just so clean. And we're finding with these connected cars, particularly with electric vehicles, that the company that gets software right is like arguably just as important, if not more so important, than the car itself. If we're ignoring software and we're ignoring the charging network, Teslas are, they're pretty good vehicles. They've got a decent amount of storage space, they're energy efficient and all that, and they've got some good hardware, but overall there's still a lot of build quality issues people complain about. And now, especially with the newer cars, they don't even have park assist. They don't have ultrasonic sensors. There's other features that a lot of people may prioritize these days, like the blind spot indicators in the mirrors, or some people want CarPlay, but I guess that's a software thing. It's not the tightest turning radius for a sedan or a crossover. ID4 has a way better handling, in my opinion, and that kind of thing. But what makes the sale for a lot of Tesla buyers is what you just said, Miller Aces, is that software. That user experience is just so clean and so well integrated and so smart and so clever. And because we realize that software plays such a major role in our vehicle ownership experience, that can be a deal breaker, honestly. Like I've watched reviews like Ifra, what's his name, Ifra Electric, uh, Alex from that channel loves his ID4. Great vehicle. He loves the way it's built, and he likes the range, and he likes the storage space and all that. But he's had such incredibly horrible software bugs with his car that it's like ruined it, and Volkswagen hasn't done enough to fix it. And same kind of situations with Lucid. Amazing efficiency, great design, and all these cool displays, and people love the handling and they love the performance, but it seems like Lucid's getting better at software now, but that first year of deliveries, terrible software experience with so many people. And even great products like the Ioniq 5 or the Kia EV6, they're great platforms. They're great vehicles with pretty good efficiency, good storage space, good range, and people like the hardware. But for the longest time, up until recently, they had no way to precondition the battery. There's not a hardware limitation. It was simply code. They just did not bake in a way in the software to ready the battery pack so that it was ready to fast charge, which left a lot of people basically stuck at EA stations, especially during the winter when it was super cold, and their cars just could not charge that fast at all. So yeah, the software is a huge reason to go with a Tesla over another brand, that's for sure. Miller says going back to ice sucked, man. Oh, I can't tell you how horrible it is that, there's been times where, of course, I was making EV videos and I wanted a Tesla, but at the time I could only drive a gas car. And then that was the situation for years because I just couldn't afford an EV. And then I ordered my Model 3, but I'd had a 6-month wait. So for months I was driving a gas car, but I had ordered a Model 3, and I'm seeing Model 3s on the road, and I'm like, why did they get it and I don't? This isn't fair. But now, oh my God, after this last trip, you've owned a Model 3 for like 6 months, and then you go back to a gas car, and not only that, it's a, old, barely working gas car. And now you're driving around and you're seeing Model 3s. So many times during this trip, I was like, that's my car. I wish I had that car. I came close to renting one, but ultimately decided it wasn't a good financial decision because we weren't driving that much. We were pretty close to the beach and stuff. So we were like, yeah, let's not rent one. We'll just put up with it for a couple weeks during this trip. But man, I had never missed this car more than then at all. I had a Toyota Camry for a rental car, and then I hated the entire 1-hour drive. Oh, geez. Hertz needs to increase their fleet size ASAP. The cars are always taken when I need one. Yeah, I think Hertz is noticing that. They're picking up on how quickly people reserve EVs whenever they're available. DJ Deerdorf says, that's a fun one. What's your watt hours per mile for the life of your vehicle? So I'll check. It's important to keep in mind that trips. Here it is. Average energy for lifetime is 241 watt hours per mile. So I think that's a little bit higher than what the EPA estimates, but I have put almost 9,000 miles on the car within 6 months, which is a bit more driving than the average person does. And the reason is because I have basically become the designated airport shuttle service for my family. And we don't live super close to the airport. It's a bit of a drive, but that's why I'm often the one picking up people from the airport or driving people to the airport, because they know if they ask me to do it, it's a lot easier of a request than if they ask someone else to do it, because my car is going to do it for like less than half the price as anybody else's car in the family. So the reason my average watt hours per mile is pretty high for the lifetime of the car is because most of my driving pretty much has been at highway speeds. And on a lot of the highways I drive, you're going slow at 70 miles an hour. Like, you can be at 70 miles per hour in the right lane, and there's still going to be a backup of people behind you that are passing you. So most of the time I end up going 73, 75 miles per hour, sometimes more. And when you're driving at high speed, plus we're in the colder months right now, and where I live, the temperature kind of fluctuates quite a bit. So when I first got the car, it was really hot, so the AC is working really, really hard to cool the battery and cool the cabin. And then in the wintertime, the heat pump's working extra hard to heat the seats, heat the cabin, and all that. So That's why, I mean, it's not bad. 241 watt hours per mile is pretty freaking good, but I just know that there's probably other Model 3 owners out there with better efficiency than that, but it's because there's not much city driving going on with my car. Most of the driving is, I would say like 80% or more of my miles are driven at over 70 miles per hour. DJ says, I have 27,000 miles in 11 months. My watt hours per mile is 303. A lot of interstate driving, and I live in Iowa cold. Oh, yeah. For sure. Those temperatures will do it. But hey, 300 watt hours per mile, I still think roughly translates to like, I want to say 100 miles per gallon equivalent. You know, you're not gonna get a gas car consuming 300 watt hours per mile. That's for sure. Where it's gonna be really hard. Not one, at least. I don't know what kind of car you drive, DJ, but I tend to drive as efficiently as I can. The trips cards is messed up still in the code though. It's like the current drive number is wrong, and the since last charge trip doesn't make any sense. Maybe they've updated and fixed that. I don't know. Let's see. One thing no one is talking about is there is more third row room in the 2023 versus 2022. When we got the 23, we were so surprised kids like the extra 3 inches or so. What? Of the Model Y? I didn't know that. Why has no one talked about that? Yeah, like where did you see this? Post about it on Twitter, please. I would love to hear about this. There's more third row room. How did they do that? Tim says, can we have a national initiative to stop people complaining about Electrify America and more of a push for NACS adoption? NACS will help other automakers sell their cars and trucks. I'm in favor of that. That's a good point, Tim. Especially for new vehicles that haven't launched yet. I feel like it's a no-brainer. Like, it's one thing to suggest it on the Rivian, which I think the Rivian would be great, and I know there'd be a little bit of growing pains, but long-term it would be the right thing to do. But there's still a lot of people that bought EVs that already have CCS, and I know for a fact they're going to feel like if Rivian or whoever, if Volkswagen or whoever switches to NACS, they're going to feel like I have a dated product. This means that the company I bought from and the brand I bought from thinks NACS is the future, but I'm the sucker who bought an early model with CCS, so I'm going to be stuck with CCS for the rest of the vehicle's life. So they're hesitant to switch because they know that that's going to tick off existing owners, and that means, are you not going to try that hard to support the charging network? Like if Rivian switch to NACS and all the adventure networks start doing NACS, then that means that the first 20,000 Rivian buyers aren't going to necessarily get the advantages of all those new NACS connectors. So I know that's frustrating, and I know that's going to be a difficult pill for a lot of people to swallow, but my suggestions would just be offering retrofits, if it's possible. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how complicated it is to switch out a CCS port on a vehicle and replace it with NACS, but I feel like it shouldn't be impossible. Maybe it's a couple grand, but I would say that's still worth it over buying a whole new vehicle, or it's still worth it over putting up with Electrify America for the rest of your life. So I think that's why people are more focused on let's fix CCS networks, because they know it's going to tick off a bunch of people if they just straight up switch to NACS. But from what I've heard is that a lot of people think that the connector has nothing to do with the reliability. So they say Electrify America is broken not because of the connector, but because of just the way it's designed. I think there's a little more to it than that. I think it's not just a coincidence that all of the CCS networks are proving to have less reliability than NACS. I think there might be something fundamentally to how the port is designed and how bulky it is and how it wears out and where the data pins are located. Because I've seen that problem in Europe where, like, as the connector wears out over time, a lot of the time to get the charge to initiate, you have to plug in and kind of pull up on the cable to get the pins to align. And I'm like, I think there is a bit of a flaw with the way it's designed, but I still think the reason we should switch everything to NACS, at least in North America, is because we are so relatively early in the EV transition. Like, yeah, we're building more EVs than ever before, and they're becoming more and more common, and they've never been more popular than they are now. But still, we're talking about, like, in terms of the global fleet of vehicles, there's so little of the fleet has been transitioned to electric. Like, we're still super early in this process, so it's not too late to switch everything to one standard. Um, let's see. Your range does not matter video is one of the most important videos ever. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. That was nice of you to say. Did I see the story about the person who salvaged a Tesla without ultrasonic sensors and the park assist was somewhat working with the Tesla vision cameras? No, I didn't see that one. How did they do that? Park assist was somewhat working. I just know there's a lot of people that have bought new Teslas recently that don't have ultrasonic, that are still waiting for the update that's still not here, which feels like a huge misstep on Tesla's part to be like, oh yeah, we can fix that later. No big deal. And then it's been months now. I think they got rid of it in October, and now we're in February and they still haven't rolled it out. I don't doubt that it can somewhat work. I hope you guys understand my view on the removal of it. Like, I have seen the way full self-driving beta performs and how the occupancy works, of how it remembers things based on your motion, so that even when things are out of field of view of the camera, the network is still able to remember, okay, there's an object there, don't hit that. But I still don't think it will perform as well, and it's concerning to me that it's taken this long for them to roll out a replacement. My guess is that they've toyed around with the replacement internally and they're not happy with the performance of it. And similar to how they talk about full self-driving getting progressively better over time, they thought that, okay, we just need a couple of weeks to iron out the kinks, iron out the bugs, and then we'll roll it out. And a few months have gone by now because they're realizing, oh, wait a second, it's not just a few bugs and a few kinks. There's like fundamental problems, fundamental rewrites to the entire way the occupancy network works that we have to roll out before it can perform at least even close. I think I can think of several circumstances where it straight up just wouldn't work as well at all. I think they're edge cases. Like, I don't know if keeping ultrasonic sensors was worth it for this alone, but basically, from what I can tell, the biggest problem is going to be if you are leaving, like, this is I mean, it's not super common, but it's a somewhat common use case of park assist that I could see come up. So basically the way it'll work is using the cameras, which don't have a clear view of the car's edges and how close they are to the objects around them. They'll be able to, like, okay, you've backed into your garage space, you're done for the day, and the cameras were able to see, okay, there's the back of the garage, or there's the bike behind you that you're pulling up next to, and it remembers that distance so that as you get closer, it can give you a somewhat accurate measurement. This is 12 inches, 6 inches, okay, stop. And you park, and you go to bed. Car could go through an update. So the occupancy network is basically reset, or I don't know if they will remember all of that data the next day or not, but definitely after an update, I think it would have a hard time remembering that exact garage layout when you left. But if you're pulling out that morning, whether it remembers it or not, it's just going to think, okay, front camera looks clear to me, and because we backed into this space, we should be good, because we got in no problem. But if you were, like, pulling out to leave for the day, and a dog or a cat, something small that wasn't tall enough to show up on the front-facing camera, which the front-facing camera can't really even see like 4 feet in front of the bumper, because it's mounted for the highway position. It's meant to look far forward, not straight up where the bumper is. And in that situation, a dog or something could run out in front of the car, and the ultrasonic sensor, I feel like, would definitely detect that, because it's a physical object and it's bouncing that frequency off of whatever's right in front of you, or even a small child. There's definitely things you could see as a passenger, as a rider, just looking at, oh, what was that the cameras, I don't think, would see, and that would not show up in the occupancy network because there wasn't like a previous time in that drive where it was measured. Now, the likelihood of that scenario is pretty rare. I think that's like probably less than 1% of drives. So I don't think that necessarily means, okay, you should definitely uh, like keep ultrasonic sensors for that one instance in which it might be better than vision only. Because Tesla's about cutting costs almost to a fault. You know, I've always complained about the no accessibility handles here. I've run into tons of situations where I'm giving older people rides in the car, older family members, and they really want that handle there. And it's so weird that this car doesn't have it, but that's part of Tesla's personality, is just we are all about cutting costs, saving where we can, and that's another situation where they're like, yeah, we're going to try to do it without ultrasonic sensors. So I'm not saying the whole ditching of the sensors was an inherently bad idea, and I hope they put them back. I'm just saying I hope that they can get their act together on the occupancy network for the Teslas that don't have them, because there's some people that have been driving these vehicles that paid $50,000-$60,000 for these cars that haven't gotten a feature that was promised to come with their car for months now. It's been so long. I'm sure it cuts down on the cost, but Justin says, don't know if you remember me, but I'm the guy who was able to flip his Bolt into a Model 3. Took delivery Thursday and loving it. Thanks for all the inspiration and content. Hope traveling went well. Wow, congratulations, Justin. I'm glad you got it. I'm glad you're loving it. That's awesome. And you swapped it out for a Bolt. Yeah, I would definitely take this over a Bolt. That's for sure. Yes, traveling went very well. Jorge said, wouldn't a simple adapter solve the NACS issue? It's an adapter that doesn't exist, but yeah, I think Rivian or whoever would adapt NACS would have to talk to Tesla about that, because adapters can be complicated, especially when the car is built for a certain voltage or a certain architecture. But the danger of selling an adapter that is NACS to CCS is it can make a lot of people think, oh, now I can take my EV to a supercharger. And that's not always going to be the case, because there's a lot of superchargers where the cable is not long enough to reach the non-Tesla. Basically, a lot of superchargers I've been to, and I really haven't been to that many, but at least two that I've been to, the way the stalls are not all positioned in the same place. I think that's another big misconception people have, is like all superchargers have the stalls in the same place. No, some of them have it on the side, some of them have them on the back, some of them have them on the back sideways. Some of them put them in all these different locations, and a lot of the time the cable is just barely long enough to where, like, I pulled into a space and I thought I was pretty far backed up, but when I grabbed the cable, it couldn't reach the connector for my Model 3, so I had to get back in the car, back it up a little bit more. It could just barely reach it. So if we're talking about a Rivian or a ID4 or an Aptera trying to access the supercharger, they're definitely not going to reach, or if they do, you're going to have to park in the stall next to the charger, which means the EV is actually occupying two spaces, not one, which isn't ideal either. So I guess that could fix it, as long as there is a clear and obvious disclaimer that this adapter is only for, Rivian chargers, or it's only for home charging. It's not supercharging grade adapter and that kind of thing. Let's see. So yeah, I think that you say the word simple adapter, and I don't think it's that simple. It's like, physically, yes, I'm sure Tesla could design, or Rivian or whoever. Now that NACS is open, I feel like you should be able to design an adapter, but the expectations that come along with that adapter need to be very transparent and clear. This is what the adapter can do, and this is what it can't do. But even so, the people who bought CCS vehicles, and then if their automaker then decides, actually, we're going to switch to NACS, everything is NACS now, knowing that they have to use an adapter every time they charge at those stations, that's still going to annoy them. Doesn't really solve it completely. I mean, it's a solution, but I still think they would be mad, even if they technically would be able to charge at all the stations. They would just be like, oh, now I got to use an adapter every time I charge my car. Kyle from Out of Spec was on Electrify America, noticed an improper latch on his Rivian, which could have resulted in an electrocution. Yeah, I saw that. That's sketchy. I just think inherently there's always going to be advantages to a first-party charger. But honestly, I was kind of surprised. I watched a channel recently that pretty small, young well, not physically young, but the channel itself was not that old, of a guy that bought a Rivian R1T, and he was talking about his charging experience, and he was just using the Rivian Adventure Network. He didn't go to EA on this trip at all. And he still ran into some issues with charging stalls claiming to be available that were not available, that were broken, and he tried to charge at one of them and it froze and it didn't charge, so he had to try a different stall. So that's what made me think it's like, okay, is Rivian just early and not knowing how to do basic things with chargers, or is there something inherently broken with not necessarily CCS, the shape of the connector, but also the protocol, the data communication that goes on between a CCS port and a DC fast charging station? And there's all kinds of like little young mistakes, young issues that these charging companies and these EV makers have because they're so new to the space. Everyone's pretty new to the EV space. Tesla's probably been doing it the longest, and Tesla's figured out all of these kinks. They were like, oh yeah, we figured that out back in 2014 when we were having this problem, so we know not to do that, and they didn't necessarily pass that on, or other people didn't pick up on it. So it makes me wonder if, like, yeah, this seeing those road trip experiences with CCS vehicles is like, I'm pretty bullish on Tesla having a unfair advantage over everybody, because just like Marquez said on Autofocus, the charging experience is half the EV ownership, like, for a lot of people. Some people who are fine with Chevy Bolts, the charging network doesn't matter all that much, but most people driving around gas cars are going to be accustomed to being able to recharge fast and get back on the road and take big trips. Most people aren't driving city cars around. And that's just something that Tesla's really nailed, and that will keep bringing a lot of people back to Tesla that don't even necessarily like the cars. They just need the charging network. And they're like, I'll put up with the car doing weird things, removing ultrasonic sensors or removing mobile connectors or removing standard connectivity. I'll put up with all that because I need the supercharging, and I can't really fault them for it. Plum says, how is the Mercedes? Yeah, I talked about it on Tailosive Life if you want to watch my video about it, but that wasn't an EV, so I wouldn't talk about it here. But it was bad. I didn't like it at all. Tim says, removing ultrasonic sensors may cut down on the cost of rear bumper, which tends to get hit most watching Wham Bam Tesla Cam, possibly lower insurance repair costs, less chips needed. Sure, I see the advantages of ditching it, absolutely, but from what I've heard of the community of people that have got Teslas without them, it's also resulted in a lot more people hitting things because they don't have park assist. It's kind of funny to me because the last vehicle I owned for 7 years didn't have any ultrasonic sensors, so, and I never hit anything. I never bumped into anything, so I find it kind of funny that I'm like, really? You guys all hitting your cars? But as mean as I am for laughing, there's definitely some truth to that. Most people buying vehicles of this price are used to having park assist and ultrasonic sensors. They're accustomed to that. They're used to it being there. So if they're used to it being there and now they buy a new car, a new Tesla from 2023, and it doesn't have it, they're more likely to bump into things and cause scratches and scrapes. So I'm hoping that's a short-term problem, and hopefully it can be fixed with an update, but it's just a bit concerning that it's February and that update is still not here. That makes me wonder, how well does this feature actually work if it's taking this long? How confident are you that this can be replicated? So, yeah. Hey, it's Michael Burkhardt. Good to hear from you. Cool that you're back from vacation. Hope you enjoyed it. How was the trip overall? It was amazing. I love Florida. I just love the weather. I love the beaches. And we met up with some friends that we hadn't seen in 5 years or so. And we just had a great conversation. We had great conversations across the board. We met some new friends, too, while we were there. I was staying at my father-in-law's condo because he's out of the country visiting some other friends right now. And we met some of the other people at the condo and just made great connections, lifelong friendships, I'm sure. And it was good to get away from home and get out of the house and see some new places, visit some new areas. And overall, yes, fantastic vacation. Lower cost bumper goes in line with how Tesla mentioned they're designing the cars to be cheaper to repair on the last earnings call. Yeah. Take out things that can't be broken. Yeah, I'm sure it lowers the price. I don't think there's any argument on that. Getting rid of ultrasonic sensors is almost purely a financial motivation. That's pretty much the only reason to do it. I mean, there's some argument to be made that, well, maybe it complicates full self-driving code a little bit to factor in ultrasonic sensors, so it helps us code a little bit easier. But the truth is, we're going to have ultrasonic sensors on cars that have the full self-driving computer anyway. So, like, you got to put up with those sensors. They're there. The only reason to get rid of them was for cost, and there's definitely cost reduction. Sandy Monroe detailed that. They said they estimated $114 could be saved per car, not to mention repair costs, especially for replacement bumpers, like you said. So, no doubt, you will save money by getting rid of those ultrasonic sensors. It's just there was a cost to the end consumer that results in a worse product. And especially since they announced they removed it, I've noticed it and paid a lot more attention to it on my car. Like, I'm going to pick up on every time I'm parking, do I actually use it? And I discovered I do. It's not hyper accurate. I wouldn't trust it with my life, but there's definitely situations where I'm like, oh, can I keep pulling forward? Can I keep pulling forward? And I look at that, those little lines that show up around the car, and I'm like, yep, I can. Okay, it's right. It's accurate. So not like a deal breaker for the record. I would still have bought this car if it didn't have that. But that's because my last car didn't have it. So yeah, like I'm concerned that they said a software update is coming and that update still has not come. Have you needed to rotate your tires yet? If not, how are you planning to do it? Tesla Tire Shop, DIY, in the process of spending $500 on a jack stand, and Tesla puck because I hate errands. Interesting. All of that sounds more complicated to me. So yes, Justin, I'm surprised did I not make a video on this? I guess I didn't. But yeah, before my trip a couple weeks ago, I rotated the tires because I actually waited a bit longer. Tesla recommends rotating your tires every... Theirs is pretty low. I think they said something like rotate them every 6,200 miles, which is pretty regularly. I was kind of surprised by how often, but EVs are heavier, so that wears out the tires faster. But I waited until I was at 8,000 miles, and I went to Les Schwab. I've been to this Les Schwab before, and I've never had a problem, so I just kind of trusted the technicians there. I did get a quote from Tesla because I knew Tesla would come out to me, and they quoted me $65, which was kind of high. I was like, I don't ever recall paying that much for a tire rotation. So I called around, and Les Schwab I had good experiences with this local shop that I've been to before. That's where we took our old car for tire stuff. But I watched them do it because I was a bit nervous about the pucks and where the jack mounts are on the EV, because I told them, like, that was the first thing I asked them. I was like, do you guys service electric vehicles? And they were like, yeah, why? And I was like, well, you just don't want to, you got to mount them in a specific way. And they're like, yeah, we have the equipment for that and stuff. So I made sure they did it right. I've looked up videos on how to do it. I just don't have the equipment for it. And I looked up the cost of the equipment, like you're saying, with the pucks and the jack stands and all that. And I was like, that's a lot of... Les Schwab quoted me, what was it? Like 20, I think it was like $25. So it was less than half the price of Tesla. And they're, they've got experience with this kind of thing. I've driven by this Les Schwab before and seen Teslas there. So I assumed, okay, that they probably have the equipment for it. And I asked the guy how the tires were looking and stuff, and he was like, yeah, no, the newer tires, you typically don't need to rotate as frequently. But I'm also not really a lead foot. I don't accelerate, and I don't drive like crazy very much. I'm pretty graceful. I'm always in chill mode, so I figured my tires would probably wear a little bit better than most Tesla tire wears, because most people probably drive them faster and quicker than I do. So I did the math on it. I was like, okay, $25 a rotation. If we do a rotation, I don't think I'll do it every 6,000 miles, maybe more like every 7,000 or 8,000 miles. I'll check in again. I'll look at the tires and see how they're doing. But most people say Tesla tires last somewhere around, I've seen some people say 30,000 miles, which is pretty low. I want to take good care of them so that I can hopefully get them to like 50, 60,000 miles, which I've heard people do online. I've seen in community forums, people say that, if you go easy on them and you maintain them well, you can get them to 50 or 60,000 miles. But okay, let's say that's let's say you just rotate them pretty frequently, so every 6,000 miles. If you can get that to 60,000 miles and you spent $25 every rotation, you spent $250 on tire rotation. Here's what really changed my mind about doing it myself, because, I thought, I shouldn't, pick a vehicle that's supposed to be cheaper to own and then pay extra for it. So I wanted to figure out what would be the cheapest solution. So I was debating doing it myself. But once the tires need to be replaced, you got to buy new ones. And you can get them from several different places. But if you buy them from a certified tire shop like Les Schwab, or Big O does this too, I'm sure pretty much all tire places do this. Basically, if you buy the tires there, they will rotate them for free for the life of the tire. So I was like, okay, that $25 every 6 to 8,000 miles or whatever is temporary. That's only right now when the car is brand new and I'm just using the stock tires that it came with. Once I replace the tires, I won't have to pay to rotate them. The rotations will be free at that point. And essentially I got to replace the tires regardless of who rotates them. So I ultimately concluded that having a third party rotate the tires for you is probably going to be cheaper than buying your own equipment. Just because whoever you're buying your tires from, they'll probably rotate them for free. I don't know if everyone does that, but the place I go to does that. So I'm like, yeah, I don't want to get all that equipment just to sit around most of the time, and then I occasionally use it just to rotate tires and stuff. That's okay. But let's see. Imagine an adapter comes out and there's bolts taking 6 to 8 supercharging spots. That would probably happen. But I think that's why Tesla would not... I don't think Tesla opening up the supercharging network is just going to be this flip of a switch and now all superchargers are open. It's similar to how it is in Europe. Only select supercharging locations will charge non-Teslas. And I think it'll be the same thing if they open it up here. It's like, okay, only vehicles with NACS can supercharge. Maybe down the road they offer an adapter for non-Teslas. I don't think that's impossible. They haven't done it yet, but they're probably only going to say, here's the superchargers you can charge your non-Tesla, and it's probably going to be a pretty low amount at first. And they'll probably do it based on activity. So the only superchargers that are available for non-Teslas are the ones that don't get much use in the first place, which means they're probably not in that convenient of a location. Like, they're not in the middle of a major city, because all those major ones are occupied full of Teslas all the time. So Tesla doesn't want to clog up their existing superchargers that are already busy and forming lines. So logistically, I just don't think Tesla opening up the network is going to make non-Teslas that appealing. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, cool, now I can supercharge my Taycan. It's like, yeah, look at how many stations you can supercharge at. And you'll be like, yeah, I guess. Not all that much. I highly recommend one, even if you keep it at home, can save you a tow if no loaner is available. I have not bought a spare tire, no. Can save you a tow if no loaner tire available. I need to look more into that, but I don't have a good place. I just don't like the idea of a spare tire being sitting there in my trunk at all times. I know it's annoying to get a tow and everything, but I would have to pack a jack kit as well with the jacking puck, because you can't jack up a Tesla like you can every other car. It's a good idea. I'm not saying I won't do it, but I haven't thought about it yet. Maybe if I get a flat and I realize how complicated and expensive it is, it'll scare me into buying a spare, but I just haven't gotten a flat yet, so I'm not that scared. Any news with Canoo? I heard they're selling a lot of their own stock, which is diluting the shares in order to start production, which is kind of a scary sign. Canoo I love their prototypes, and I love their, they claim they're in production, but they've only built like a few dozen. They're about as in production as the Tesla Semi is. But their financials have always been a huge wreck. They're always like on the brink of bankruptcy and barely making the cut, but they're still here and they're still producing. I don't know if they're hoping for a last minute buyout or something, but Yeah, nothing super encouraging with Canoo so far. I think they're just kind of prioritizing fleet buyers for now. Thank God Aptera included DC fast charging. Even 40 kilowatts is fast enough. Oh, yeah, 40 kilowatts I still think is plenty for the Aptera. But they said they hopefully want to go up to 60 kilowatt. Um, should I buy a Model 3 now or wait for Highland? Asks Ali Bangu. It all comes down to you, man. Like, there's not a one-size answer. I personally think the Model 3 is a great vehicle in its current state. Um, I love mine. I guess mine is a bit different than the one you would get now, but you would get a cheaper one, especially if you got it with the federal tax credit if you took delivery by the end of the month. Um, it depends on your financial situation and do you like the current state of the vehicle. I mean, we've talked about it before, but waiting for the next gen refresh coming next year or the year after that you're never going to be happy if you're trying to time the right refresh, because Tesla's always updating. Tesla's always going to have another refresh around the corner. So you ask yourself if you can accept that first. Can you accept that, hey, maybe Project Highland launches in the third quarter? Maybe it comes out and it's really futuristic and cool, and you may buy it and you may love it, but just be aware that maybe in 3 to 4 years after that, there will be another refresh that's even cooler. And now you have the old one, and that's just something you have to come to terms with a lot of new car ownership, new products in general. Like, can you accept that you may not have the latest version forever? If you can't, then I guess wait for Project Highland, but then in that case, you may be waiting forever because there will be another refresh and another refresh. And I know that some refreshes are bigger than others, and this Highland one sounds like a pretty decent refresh. But I can't give you a concrete timeline on it. Like, I don't know if I'm telling you to wait for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. Because the Reuters report claimed that it isn't going to be ready until the third quarter of this year, and that it would launch in China first. And China tends to get things in their lineup 2 to 3 quarters before the U.S. does. So I may be telling you to wait a year or more just by saying wait for Highland. But also, I feel like having watched Tesla update their cars over time, their vehicles are progressively getting better and worse simultaneously. There are certain aspects that improve and other aspects that get worse. Like when Mike, who's in the chat, Canoo's, that's a good channel name if you want to cover Canoo. When Mike bought his car, you got a year of premium connectivity for free, and you got you could buy full self-driving for $6,000-$7,000. And I think it was pretty cheap. It's cheaper than it is now. Even I think you could have gotten it. I think he bought his when it was like $53,000 for the base Model Y. So there, and he had access to different credits. There were different rebates and different tax breaks that are not available now. So like, it's constantly changing. But now the new vehicles, sure, they have AMD Ryzen, and sure, they have a heated steering wheel now, and they've got the dual pane windows and lithium iron phosphate and built-in wireless charger. There's things they've added, but they've also dropped the ultrasonic sensors. They no longer include the mobile connector. They've also limited standard connectivity for 8 years. I bring attention to that, and I don't see very many other people bring it up, but I think that could become a real annoyance in the future. The reason I'm concerned about the standard connectivity thing is because Tesla has not told us what happens when your car is outside of standard connectivity. And they can't give us a clear answer on what standard connectivity means. All they say on the website is navigation. And I've also seen things like using your phone as a key and using Bluetooth. These are all part of standard connectivity. So what happens when your car doesn't have standard connectivity? Does that mean your phone doesn't work as a key? Does that mean GPS navigation doesn't work anymore? Or it can work, but you have to pay for premium connectivity, or maybe they offer standard connectivity with a membership and that's cheaper than premium. I don't know. But because they haven't given us a clear answer, that's what worries me about it. And I think that could easily eat into it could be a way, like, I know this news dropped a while ago because I remember making a video about it when I was visiting my parents' place out of state, and I visited them last July. I was there last July, and I remember the update that said, if you ordered a vehicle after July 18th or July 20th of 2022, then it only comes with 8 years of standard connectivity. I was like, why was Tesla changing that at that time? What happened? What sparked that little update? And my thought process was maybe Tesla is worried about resale value getting progressively lower as their cars age. You know, how much is a 2020 or what's a Model 3 used going to cost in 5 to 10 years? If the used market for Tesla, because Teslas don't, you know, deteriorate all that much. I just watched a review of a few weeks ago of a guy that had well over 200,000 miles on his Model 3, still the original battery pack, and he had to replace some little things, but overall still the vehicle was working and he's very happy with it. So if there's too many used vehicles, that could affect present day sales. Okay, we can't move as many new vehicles, so they say, how about after this time period, the desirability of the used car goes down a lot. And I think standard connectivity not being with the life of the vehicle might be an easy way to deter people from going used, is because, oh, well, now if it's the year, that change won't go into effect and we won't know how it works until 2030. So like, if we get to 2030 and find out that, oh, when your vehicle doesn't have standard connectivity anymore, it means you have to pay for premium connectivity basically for life to have basic things like Bluetooth and GPS. That would make the used market a lot less appealing. If you knew that you were having to drop $100 or $150, who knows, they might raise the price of premium connectivity by then. If you got to drop $100 to $150 a year on your used Tesla because it doesn't come with that for free anymore, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's nothing and they just updated it as a technicality. Maybe they were just covering themselves legally in case, you know, they promise certain things like GPS, and maybe by 2030 there will be different GPS standards that the old cars don't support. So if they promise standard connectivity for life, that means that if that happens 20 or 30 years from now, Tesla would still have to update my car for free. They would have to put in new hardware and new chips and say, well, we promised this guy standard connectivity, so we got to give it to him. You didn't renew standard connectivity? Then put that aux into your phone. Bluetooth isn't available. That's the funny thing. Teslas don't have aux ports. Let's see. Should buy now. Prices might rise over time in the future. Oh, what are you talking about? Model 3? I mean, Model 3 prices have actually gotten down. I actually think a good indication of what Tesla's going to do with the pricing, if you want a little preview, is to check existing inventory. I've tweeted out websites that do this. They track how many vehicles are available, and whenever inventory gets low, it's more likely prices will go up, so Tesla can help control the demand and catch up on the backlog a bit. When inventory gets high, that's when you should expect price cuts. Actually, before the massive $13,000 price cut the Model Y got, Model Y inventory was at an all-time high. There were more available to take delivery of than ever before. So if you're expecting prices to drop, make sure inventory is on the increase. If you're expecting prices to rise, make sure inventory is on the decrease. And right now, Model 3 inventory is kind of leveled out. It's not super high or low, so they'll probably keep it around the same. So let's see. An Aptera 3-seater like an F1 McLaren seems like a realistic next platform they could build in the distant future. They talked about doing a 3-seater a while ago, but I don't think that's their focus. A family member paid $250 for a 12-volt battery replacement on a gas car. Really? That's a lot. Jeez. My goodness. Let's see. The FSD visualization almost gives a surround view image when parking next to other cars, maybe a bird's eye view with future FSD updates. If the bird is a cyborg, yeah, because the bird's eye view isn't going to show a real world look. I don't think Tesla believes in having a bird's eye view. People have been asking for that for years, and they haven't given us anything because I think their view is the park assist lines accomplish the same thing. Like, do you need to be able to see the color of the asphalt when you're doing 360, or do you just need to know don't hit here, don't hit here? There's built-in blind spots with the current camera layout, and I don't see that changing. Occupancy network is good for telling the computer don't hit something, but it's not necessarily good at recreating the visuals of reality. So I think it would just look weird if they tried to recreate it personally. Justin says, good points in regards to your tire rotation. My validation for the materials are also partially including changing for winter tires. Ah, yes, good point. I didn't think about that. I don't live in a place where it snows or gets icy, so I wasn't factoring in swapping to winter tires. But yeah, I guess if you were doing that annually, probably twice a year, then it would make more sense to buy the equipment and all that. Discount tire will rotate for free regardless. Also important to have road hazard coverage on the tires for free replacements with flats. Tesla tires are expensive. Yeah, I've noticed that. I really don't think people are gonna buy EVs because they're cheaper. I think they're gonna buy them because they're better and easier to own, especially Teslas with the Supercharger network. I feel less confident about that statement with non-Teslas because I just I was so hopeful, you know. I was so excited when Tesla unveiled the NACS connector and said this is open and everybody can use it, and if you use it, you can access superchargers. I thought that was a huge game changer. I was like, okay, now other companies can really get on board with this. And they announced it months and months ago. When was that? That was, I think, back in November or something. It's either like November or October, and still no one other than Aptera has said they're going to use it. And I've just gotten a lot more disappointed now, because before I knew that, okay, you can try to adopt the Tesla connector, but there's this like patent thing you have to agree with, and it's not very protective for your IP and your liability. So I understood why no one had really used it before. Now that it's an open standard for free that anybody can access, I have less forgiveness for companies not using NACS. I'm kind of like, come on, all right, come on. Especially new companies that haven't delivered something yet. You like, or new vehicles. Like, no one has bought a Hyundai Ioniq 6 yet, at least in the U.S., which is where we're talking about charging connectors. It's like, okay, that car doesn't exist, so you're not going to be hurting anything by saying this one uses NACS, because there's not going to be a bunch of previous Ioniq 6 owners that go, oh man, I wanted to have NACS on mine. And you're not promising Electrify America charging to those buyers, right? That's just available with normal charging fees like any other car. So I feel like there's no reason for that car not to include NACS now. It's like you're starting from scratch. This is like a new vehicle, new EV. Just, could we at least, if we can't switch everyone to NACS, just say all new models that are coming out? Like the I've heard rumors that the Volvo, what's it called? I can't remember all these. The C90, the EX90 or whatever, CX90 Recharge. That there's a new Volvo coming out that looks a lot more like a Polestar on the inside, and it's like, that's a brand new EV, brand new vehicle for the nation. Like, just start that one with NACS. Just say all the new models can have NACS at least. Come on. Let's see. I think it's really disappointing Tesla doesn't have at least room for an optional spare tire. Yeah, I mean, I kind of get why they do it. I mean, I've heard of other new vehicles, even gas vehicles, that don't come with spares anymore. That's kind of like a new car problem, not just a Tesla problem. But for one, it's added weight that doesn't help with your efficiency. So if you're trying to make EVs look good by saying, here's how much energy they use, adding the spare kind of eats into that. And they're not as simple to change tires on as any other vehicle. You have to kind of have the proper equipment for it, and you got to know exactly where to jack it. So I get why they're not expecting every owner to be capable of doing it, but let's just say I wouldn't complain if they offered it. You know, if they decided, hey, from here on out, the EX90, thank you, Mike. From here on out, all Teslas will come with a spare tire. I'd be like, great, that's wonderful, that's fantastic. I think they should, but I get the argument why they don't, especially with Tesla being the cost cutters they are. Sadie Monroe said that Tesla's trying to reach 1.9 million Model Y production in 1 year based on the Investor Day teaser. Yeah, I talked about that at the beginning. That sounds believable to me. I liked his interpretation of it with all the stamping door pieces all stacked up. Yeah, it's a cool image. I love that look. I love the focus on it being for manufacturing. I can pull it up here so we can, like, look at how many cars that is. That's amazing. It's just all those little holes are doors. You just try to imagine that many cars being made. Yeah, pretty pretty cool invite. I like their little marketing things they do. My spare tire recommendation comes with the knowledge that less loaner tires on the road with more Teslas on the road. 4 years ago, I got 2 loaner tires, no problem, but hearing now they are not freely available. A flat tire in Tesla can be a pain. Typically, fix a flat may not work with the foam on the tire. I keep one in my garage for the Model X. I got you. Yeah, it's really not a bad idea. I need to look more into it. I'm just more annoyed with how it's going to eat into our storage space because I do use the sub trunk on our Model 3. We keep a lot of our tennis stuff in there. And then we were getting groceries the other day and we were putting a bunch of stuff in. So I just know that everywhere I go, carrying around that spare is not going to be very convenient, but it's probably a good idea. The invite looks like a wall texture. Yeah. That's cool.
Yes.
Non-standard connectivity, car is always unlocked. Big brain. And the radio is the only available music option. That almost sounds believable. Whoa, Pen! Just supercharged. Thank you so much for the donation. That was completely unnecessary. I just wanted to talk to you guys. Now you're super chatting. Thank you. Very kind of you. Thank you. Do you think they will announce a 25K Tesla? And if so, how many years do you think it will be available? No. No. No is my answer. I look at it in 2 different ways. I see what Tesla thinks they're going to do, and then I have my guess on what I think will actually happen. So my guess is that there is a 3rd generation platform in development that we're going to learn more about, and it's not going to be very flashy. I think it's going to be very nitty-gritty engineering details on alloys, castings, batteries, chemistries, and how they plan on building they're just going to call it like a simpler vehicle that's cheaper to build. They're not going to brand it Model 2 or they're not going to give us a price on it. They don't even tell us what the Tesla Semi or the Cybertruck costs. You know, they're getting very secretive these days, and I don't think Tesla can financially. I don't think they can just come out and say, we're going to release a $25,000 car next year, because that's just current day sales would just, no one would buy a Model 3 at that point. They'd say, I'm waiting for that one. That's going to be cheaper. That's going to be the cool one. So they can't just drop that on us without hurting present day sales. Maybe they can. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool if they did. But maybe the key with that vehicle is to make it really unappealing. How do you not kill present day sales? You make the cheap car that's coming around the corner not that good. So say it'll have, I don't know, no heated seats, no, it'll be all cloth, and there'll be no powered trunk, and there will be no frunk, and it's going to be so uncomfortable. I don't know. You can't really say that. Maybe you just say the range is really bad or something. Maybe you say like, well, it's mostly for robo-taxis, and we figured out robo-taxis don't need to have a 300-mile range, so all of these cars are going to have a 150-mile range. Maybe if you say something like that, everyone's going to go, "Ugh, I don't need that one, I guess." But I don't know. That doesn't sound logical to me either. But I don't see a scenario where they just straight up say this is going to be a $25,000 car. But I think what Tesla thinks they're going to do, and I think they're going to fail at this, but their mindset is we just need to build a super cheap car that we can scale up production of really quickly, but this car is not to be sold to customers. It is a robo-taxi vehicle that doesn't have pedals, doesn't have a steering wheel, doesn't even have mirrors. Legally, how are they going to do that? Again, there's problems on top of problems with this idea, but I've seen Elon talk about it, and the way he has talked to people on Twitter about it. Like Omar made this tweet once where he was like, you don't get it, that there is no $25,000 car. The next vehicle is the robotaxi. And the goal of making it super cheap and super affordable is that you'll be able to crank them out really fast. And because they're really small and efficient and affordable, you can undercut all the Ubers, all the taxi services, and all the Lyft drivers, because this car is going to be super cheap to build and it'll drive you around for pennies on the dollar, compared to other taxi services. So Elon's thought is full self-driving, we're almost done. We're basically there now. We're so close. Therefore, let's just unveil our plans on how to mass produce this vehicle so that investors see, oh, this is going to be super profitable. This is going to make more money than any other vehicle because of the cycle life of the battery. I'm guessing the Gen 3 platform uses lithium iron phosphate. And that'll make it really cheap to build, and it'll last a real long time. And over the course of its life, it'll make, $100,000, $200,000, but it only costs Tesla 15 grand or 10 grand to build. And because it's so cheap to build and it makes all this money, everyone will want to invest in the stock because it is Investor Day at the end of the day, right? This is meant for a way to convince us to buy Tesla stock, I guess. Maybe they should just call it Tesla Financial Advice. Please buy our stock. That's another way of phrasing it. But so I think their logic is we don't need to sell the next vehicle because you're just going to ride around in it. And that'll be cheaper than owning it outright. You don't have a need to own the vehicle because that requires registration and insurance and everything, and you'll be far better off just hailing one, calling a robotaxi when you need to take a ride, and that's going to be way cheaper than owning your own car. That's Tesla's plan. I believe that, and I've seen Elon like those tweets where people say that the robotaxi is the Gen 3 vehicle, and Elon will say exactly to certain tweets saying you're not going to sell that car to people. So saying it's a $25,000 Tesla is kind of misleading because it's like, well, that implies they would sell it to us. I don't think they would sell it to us in their mind. What will actually happen, I think, is more likely full self-driving will take longer in all ways. Regulatory will take longer than they expect. Getting the software safer than a human will take longer than they expect. Ironing out the edge cases and teaching it road signs like don't turn right on red. Very basic things. It still can't do this after like 3 years of being in beta. Just little things that'll stack up that will prevent them from rolling it out will result in, okay, we have designed this Generation 3 platform to be autonomous, but because we haven't quite cracked the formula just yet, we're going to modify the design a little bit, and that will delay it, so it'll take longer to come out than they thought. And they'll just have some way of really quickly making it a manual-driven vehicle. And it will not be optimized for ownership. It could have a really tiny display, even smaller than the Model 3 display. They're going to cut all kinds of corners you don't want them to cut. They could have tiny, like Aptera-looking mirrors that are really narrow, or they could say, you have a phone. You can use GPS on your phone. You don't need GPS on the car. So just imagine the left third of the Tesla display that's just for controls, like the trunk and the front, and then it gives you the full self-driving visualization. That's it. That's the whole UI. There's no need for navigation. You just tell the car, I need to precondition the battery before you charge, and other than that, everything's super bare bones, and the materials are really bad, and it's just not a very luxurious purchase. And they say, well, in the meantime, it'll be steer-by-wire, and the pedals won't be actually connected to everything. In the meantime, we'll sell these to people for real cheap, but long-term, we plan on this being a robotaxi. So how many years till I think that'll be available? I don't even know where the factory square footage would be for it at this point. So I would say it's probably not going to be available for another 3 to 5 years, likely. Let's see. This will be a $25,000 for us in parts and production costs. You pay subscription fee. Yeah, that sounds about right. It costs us $25,000 to build, but honestly, I think the Model 3 is probably close to that already. Maybe it's $28,000 to build. If they do announce the $25,000 car, it's going to literally shut down the competition. I think they will announce it just for that. But that would shut down Model 3 demand too. So yes, that would hurt the competition, but it would also hurt Tesla. The Osborne effect is a very real thing. I don't think they would announce a $25,000 car is coming when Model 3 demand is not as high as they want it to be. Could folks buy a fleet and have a big taxi service with multiple vehicles, cheaper in bulk? Yeah, Dad. Hey, good to see you. Um, yeah, that was asked about, I think, at Autonomy Day in 2019, and that was the thought process. They said you could just. Someone was like, "What's to stop me from buying a bunch of Teslas and turning them into a whole fleet?" And he was like, "Yeah, you can do that. We're still going to be making money off it because you're paying us for the vehicles, and Tesla gets a portion of that robotaxi revenue." So he was like, "That doesn't hurt us, but yeah, you can do it." Personally, I think even if they did crack the code and full self-driving ends up being 10 times safer than a human and ready for robotaxi rollout, I don't think it would make much sense for Tesla to sell vehicles to people anymore. Maybe the higher end vehicles like the Model S and X and in the Cybertruck, but if you truly crack that code and you find a way to make a vehicle that can drive anywhere a human can drive, basically level 4, level 5, whatever you want to call it, and that means based on their revenue, even undercutting Uber and Lyft, the vehicle can make $20,000, $30,000 a year, and the battery pack can last 10 plus years. Now, why the heck would you sell, Mike or me a Model Y or a Model 3? You'd sell us the car and you'd make maybe $20,000 in profit or maybe $10,000 in profit, depending on what the cost of manufacturing is. Or you could turn that vehicle into a robotaxi and it will make you $20,000, $30,000 a year, long term $300,000 a year. Why wouldn't you just do that? Like, financially, it makes way more sense to just keep the vehicle yourself and rent it out as a robo-taxi in as many places as possible and just kind of flood the market with cheap cost of transportation, which is better for the environment in Tesla's world, because that means instead of my car sitting in my garage or a parking lot half the day, it's only going to go to where it's needed. And Tesla makes a bunch of money from that, and the environment experiences less total emissions because now one vehicle is replacing the job of 5 gas vehicles instead of what we have now, where one EV is replacing one gas car for the most part. So yeah, like theoretically, they've said they're open to the idea of you owning a fleet of vehicles and you rent them all into the robotaxi network, but I don't see that happening. I think the robotaxi formula is going to end up being way more problematic than they expect. Is their own taxi service, not let others in on the cash potential. The problem with that is they've sold people, and they've said publicly that they haven't sold people. They've sold to people the idea that if you buy full self-driving today, then that means your car that you currently own will be able to go out and make you money. So how they prioritize that, I'm not so sure they will, even if they do figure out robo-taxis. Like, Mike bought full self-driving, and at one point Tesla said that Mike will be able to add his vehicle to the robo-taxi fleet. So, I mean, the problem with that is Tesla didn't put down a timeline on any of this, which means they can theoretically take as long as they want, and it can just be considered well, we haven't delivered on that yet, but we're working on it. That's what they do with this lawsuits against full self-driving and stuff, is they say, well, it's been delayed, we've pushed it off a little bit, it's not ready yet, but we're working on it. Same thing with like the rollout of FSD beta. They said that would come to all cars that have full self-driving purchased. Well, there were some 2016 Model S's that didn't have the necessary hardware, the cameras or the MCU to do FSD beta. So they just, a lot of those 2016 Model S and X owners that paid for full self-driving were like, when am I going to get beta? And Tesla was like, we're focusing on the new vehicles right now. We'll get you beta eventually, but they don't have to commit to a timeline. As long as they, I guess, at some point in all of existence, give you full self-driving beta, but that could take them 10 years. I think it could be a similar thing where they figure out how to do robo-taxis with, here's a realistic hypothetical I have in my head. They're talking more and more these days about Hardware 4, the next generation full self-driving computer, which is, I guess, going to have higher resolution cameras. And they say that Hardware 4 will be like 10 times safer than a human, but you don't need it for full self-driving because they claim hardware 3.0, which is what Mike has and I have, and most Teslas these days have hardware 3 built in. They say that can achieve 3 to 5 times safer than a human. I don't know how you can project that when you haven't figured it out yet. Like, how do you know it's going to be that much safer if, you thought it would be ready by 2020 and it's 2023 and it's still not ready? So I don't know how you can project that, but what I think is more likely is, okay, Tesla figures out with hardware 4.0 that they get way better results because it's a newer architecture with high resolution cameras and with lower latency, so it can react faster and quicker and everything. So that means you can basically get safer than a human. I don't know if it's 10 times safer, but you can get maybe 10 times, you could get maybe 3 to 4 times safer than the average human driver with hardware 4.0. And because Tesla wants the public to know, hey, we're serious and robotaxis are coming, they design all of these robotaxi vehicles with the Gen 3 platform with hardware 4. And they start deploying those because they're in a big rush to prove to everyone, see, we delivered robotaxis there. We did it. Kind of like Tesla semi deliveries. It's like they did start, but it's at super low volume and they didn't tell us much about them. We still don't know about the payload capacity. We still don't know about the price. We don't know how many they've delivered, so it's probably not that many. But I feel like similarly, they'll rush out robotaxis as quickly as they can, but they're all going to have hardware 4, and a bunch of people who paid for full self-driving, like Randy and Mike on their car, are going to say, hey, well, I'm supposed to be able to turn my vehicle into a robotaxi that makes me money. When can I do that? And Tesla can say, well, you're on hardware 3. We're working on bringing that feature to hardware 3, but we haven't quite figured it out yet, so just stay tuned for more. And similar to all the people waiting for FSD beta on the Model S and X from 2016, Tesla can just push you further and further to the back of the line and say, we have bigger fish to fry, but we'll get to you eventually. As long as they don't say, no, you won't get it, then they can't get sued because of how they've structured. Well, I mean, they can't lose a lawsuit. Anyone can get sued, but the likelihood of them losing that lawsuit is not good because in court, Tesla can just say, well, we're still working on it. We figured it out on hardware 4, but not hardware 3 yet. I think that sounds very believable, is that like the promises they made for the older cars are not going to be delivered on for a very, very long time because they've got this open-ended timeline. They don't need to finish it by any particular time. So that means that there will be hundreds of thousands or millions of cars that are all like, why can't my car be a robotaxi? And Tesla's like, well, because even if it turns out that, okay, actually there was a hardware limitation, we need hardware 4 to make robotaxis work, Tesla's not going to rush to retrofit all the hardware 3 vehicles with hardware 4 because that's going to be crazy expensive, adding new cameras and new full self-driving computers to every single vehicle. That's going to be so pricey and so complicated to promise to everybody that they would much rather delay that feature and say we're working on it and it's not ready yet for many, many years. They would rather wait like 5-10 years and say, oh, we haven't quite figured it out, but we're pretty sure there's a way to do it with your existing hardware. And you're like, how are you going to do it? And you're like, well, team is busy right now. We're all focused on ironing out robotaxis because that's the real moneymaker. Cybertruck in a robotaxi fleet would be wild. I'm probably more likely to use a Cybertruck as a rental than I am to own one. I don't see myself ever. Maybe something will change, but I don't need a pickup truck, and I don't think I ever will. But there's been times where I've needed to borrow a truck, but we just have so many trucks between friends and family members that it's always like maybe once or twice a year we need to move something big. It'd be like, hey, can we borrow your truck? And they're like, sure, take it. Just yesterday I was my grandma picked us up from the airport, and she has several trucks at their house, and she was like, if you ever need it, just let me know because we have way too many trucks. She's like, take my truck whenever you want to use something. So I find that way more cost effective than, okay, for the 2 times a year I need a pickup truck, I'm gonna buy an entire truck for that. It's like, no, I don't. It's not that common. So I would much rather rent a truck occasionally because it's not that common for me. And if the Cybertruck was available on Turo or something for $100 or less or something. I don't know. I just rent one out for a weekend and cool, I got a Cybertruck. Yeah, okay, I'm done. now I'll spend $400-$500, get some videos out of the Cybertruck, get to drive it around, get a feel for it, get to appreciate it, and get to supercharge with it and go camping or something, and then say, okay, that was fun. All done. No more. I'm good. Let's see. Thinking about leasing a Model 3 at least till my Cybertruck is made. I don't know where you are in the world, Johnny, but it could be a while. I think limited production will start this year, but I think that demand is so high for the Cybertruck, there is likely a crap ton of Tesla employees that they can keep deliveries internal. Just like the 4680 Model Y, although that was not a very compelling vehicle and not that many people want it still. But for the first 2 months of production, they kept all the deliveries internal. All of the Model Ys with 4680 batteries just went to employees. None of them went to actual customers that were outside of Tesla. Although with Cybertruck, there's probably 10 times, 15 times as many actual Tesla employees that want one. And the beauty of that is if they keep it internal, they don't have to publicly state the pricing. If there's any quality control issues, they keep that all internal. So they get the good PR that Cybertruck production has started, deliveries have begun, and they're driving around city streets. People are taking pictures. So they get all the PR and none of the backlash by keeping it internal. Why? I don't know if that's the pure motivation, but I'm just telling you that's what Tesla did. They also, the first Model Ys were delivered to employees first, not to actual customers. I think several months before actual customers got them. It was I remember seeing employees driving around the Model Y in December of 2019, and the first customer deliveries were March of 2020. So there was 3 months. Cybertruck, I think, could be even more so because, for one, it's a lot bigger vehicle that needs a much larger battery pack, so I think it will take longer to build. Elon himself admitted it's going to be very tricky to mass produce, so I don't think it'll ramp up as quickly. Second, the demand for it is off the charts, so there's a good chance that even internally, production could begin, and there still could be no customer deliveries for many months. I don't know about a year. That'd be quite a long time to keep it internal. But I just mean it could be 4 to 6 months of just employee deliveries before anyone else gets it, and then it's going to be based on proximity to the factory, most likely, because that's what Tesla did in the past. So if you're not living close to Giga Texas, you could still be many, many years out before your delivery is ready. But I try not to recommend leases just because leases is a guaranteed way to throw money down the drain because you don't really get any ownership out of it at all. Whereas I feel like if you buy a Model 3 today, own it for 3 years, and then sell it, you'll probably make more money off of that than just the lease, or you'll lose less money than if you were to lease it. But I could be wrong. That's kind of predicting what Model 3 pricing is going to do, which it's hard to know for sure. Buy back more Highland and new platform info. New platform will have 3 different models for different use, all with better function and fuel savings than any other automaker. Fuel savings? What are you talking about, fuel savings? Yeah, I don't know about Highland. I think that's probably not going to be ready till later this year, but I could see the 25K only having 100 miles of range so that it would not actually eat any Model 3 demand and then sell it to more low-income countries. Maybe. I think 100 miles is pretty low. But if you did... If it was being pitched as a robotaxi vehicle, it wouldn't really need much more. You're right on that. Kind of like the Rivian delivery vans. I think those have a max range of 150 or something. They're not a very high range, but for their use case, that's fine because you're not going cross country delivering packages. Those delivery vans are just kind of driving around city streets delivering packages from a warehouse to residential areas. They don't spend much time on the freeway. So you could probably make that same case with at least the first generation robotaxis. Later down the road, maybe people are going to start taking robotaxis on long distance road trips, in which case a longer range one would make sense. But for the first generation robotaxis, sure, you could limit it to just San Francisco or just the Bay Area, and then 100 miles is plenty. You can make it a lot more efficient by using a lot smaller battery pack, and uses very little energy per mile. Plus, it'd be way cheaper for Tesla to build if they don't have that much range. So if they're like, we ran data, you could probably do research on this, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out like 80 to 90% of Uber or Lyft rides are, sub 20 miles. So 120 miles of range on a robotaxi is fine. It can drive around a bunch of people, make money, and then stop and charge real quick, and then go back and make a bunch more money. I guess probably the limiting factor with the range of the robotaxi would be how often does it have to go somewhere and stop and be plugged in, or that kind of thing. And who's plugging it in, who's maintaining it, or is Tesla going to have their own custom superchargers just for robotaxis that have the little automated plugs that can plug themselves in? That way they don't need a person. But kind of like the Boring Company, they still have human drivers for the Teslas in the tunnels. I don't think Tesla will ever make anything with less than 200 miles. Cyberquad. I'm just telling you now, Cyberquad probably won't have more than 200 miles. But I get what you mean. Elon seems to be fundamentally against anything with less than 250 miles of range, which I personally think is a bit too high for the bare minimum. Obviously, more range is nice to have, but what I've experienced in my ownership of, someone asked what car I have. It's the Model 3. Matteo Massi. Like, the charging network and your charging speed is a much bigger factor than your max range number. So I personally, I'd be totally fine with like that standard range Model Y. It had 240 miles of range. If you got supercharging access, it's not really that bad. It adds a little bit of time to the road trip to have to stop more frequently, but as long as you can supercharge quickly, then anything 200 plus is probably pretty reasonable. And honestly, I think even I've seen people with older Model S's that don't get over 200 miles on a charge anymore, and they still like them. They still live with them. They're not the road trip machines that the newer cars are with 400 miles of range and 250 kilowatts. But I have a relative with like a 2015 Model S. And his battery pack's kind of old. I can't remember what his max range number was, but I remember he didn't buy the 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. He got like the smaller one. It was like a 75 kilowatt hour Model S battery pack. And now, of course, it's pretty old. It's getting older. It's not that old. It's only 20. It's only 8 years old, which is funny. I on vacation drove a Mercedes that's 52 years old. So 8 years old feels like nothing. But still, I'm sure the range on his Model S is like low 200s, maybe sub 200. But he still drives it all the time because it came with the unlimited supercharging. So he's like, yeah, I don't care if it takes a little bit longer. Whatever. It's cheap. So he's motivated by the cost of supercharging being low. In the same way, if Tesla were to make a super cheap EV and they didn't want that EV to kill the sales of the Model 3 and Y, I would argue that sacrificing on the range a bit would be fine. Like, I think that's the only way you could not have the Osborne effect. If at Investor Day in 3 weeks, Tesla comes out and says, this is going to be a compact $25,000 car, and it'll have autopilot, and it'll have mobile app connectivity, and it'll have supercharging access. And the one big caveat is, but the range is 170 miles. I bet a surprising number of people would be okay with it. I bet a decent number of people would be like, yeah, I could live with that. That's reasonable. I could get by. But I still know a ton of people that'd be like, no, that's too low. Especially if I could get a Model 3 today with 270 miles of range. That's more what I like. But it would probably influence a lot of people's... Let's just say it would probably prevent a lot of people from buying used. There's a lot of used Model 3s right now that are going for, $30,000, low 30s. And they have, they're used vehicles, so they got some wear and tear on them. They've got some degradation, especially on those standard range Teslas from 2019 and 2020. Those have, 30,000, 50,000 miles of degradation. And on day one, they only had a 240 mile range. So I could see a lot of people saying, no, I'd rather be the first owner I'd rather be the one buying it new, and it'll probably be LFP, so the cycle life's pretty high, and you could charge it to 100%. So when you really weigh it, I'd rather have a new Tesla with 180 mile of range than a used Tesla with 50,000 miles on it that has 200 miles of range, but it's got the old hardware. It doesn't have Intel. It has Intel, and it has no wireless chargers built into it or anything. I don't know if the 25K car would or so, but I could see that would be the only way I could see them unveiling it way ahead of delivery, is if they compromised on the range a lot and just said, well, this vehicle, that kind of supports my argument. This vehicle is optimized for robotaxi access. And because robotaxis are mostly going to be doing short routes within city limits, at least for the first generation, we don't need robotaxi range to be that high, for the same way that the Rivian delivery van doesn't need a lot of range, because it's kind of keeping things at relatively low speed and it's not traveling all that far. So to optimize it for robotaxi use, there's no steering wheel, there's no pedals, and it's a small battery pack. But I guess we should sell it in the meantime before we get full self-driving ready. So that means steer-by-wire, really small, cheap display, basic interior with even less luxury features than the Model 3. And that also could involve a smaller than usual battery pack. I'd be curious how big the battery pack would be if you were only targeting like a 170 mile range or so. If we took 100 miles of range off of my car, that would be what? Would be over a third. It'd be like a 40% reduction. Not quite half the range, but it'd be like if we reduce the battery pack 60 kilowatt hours down by 40%. So maybe you could get it down to like a 45, maybe? Like a 45 kilowatt hour LFP battery pack. That would be pretty freaking cheap, to be honest. Now you're talking like battery size of the launch edition Aptera, and it's iron-based. So that helps with the affordability. Because the battery pack is smaller, it weighs less, so it's more efficient, and that means you get better range. So this is why I love efficiency. And honestly, talking about it this way is getting me excited for it. It's like, I'd be kind of interested to see, because for years we talk about how much range can we get out of our EV. We got the long-range Model 3 to 350 miles. Okay, we get the Model S to 400 miles. We got Lucid Air to 500 miles. We got the Tesla Semi to 500. It'd be kind of cool if Tesla just had the guts to say, our supercharger network is so good that we're willing to make a lower range. We had long range, we have standard range, now we have low range. Like, this is the low range Tesla. And sure, the range is not very good, but it's attractive to people on a budget. Maybe more city drivers, which I'm sure will be out there. I know of many people that have said, I just drive my Tesla mostly to work and back, and that's enough for me, and I have a different vehicle for road trips, or I just don't need to take that many road trips or what have you. But personally, I would still take a 170 mile range Tesla Model 2 or compact or whatever you call it, Model B. Elon's tweeting about Bs. Someone DM'd me, do you think the new car is called the Model B? And I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but yes, I want that to happen. So if the Model B has 170 miles of range, but it can supercharge, I would take that over a Chevy Bolt that can go 250 miles on a charge, but it's limited to 50 kilowatts. Whereas the Model B, maybe that can do 170 kilowatts or so, but it'd be iron-based cathode, and knowing Tesla, it would probably be a super minimal basic interior. And it would be basically the same price as a Bolt. Yeah. Bolt's starting at $26,000. Then there's tax credits, but then the Model B would qualify for the same credits. So, yeah, in that way, of course you would get the YouTube channel saying, well, when you really do the math, it's a sub $20,000 car. But we don't know if it qualifies for what. The tax credit changes by the month. I can't keep track of it anymore. It's so impossible. Like, for the longest time, they were saying there would be a point of sale rebate of $7,500 in 2022. Then that didn't happen. And then they said, okay, it's going to be a federal tax credit in 2023, but it has to accommodate for this many battery materials within the pack and where they were mined. But then in December, they said, actually, the first 2 months, it doesn't matter where the battery materials come from. So we're like, okay, cool, full $7,500 credit for everybody. And then once we get to 2023, it's, oh, but your vehicle has to be a certain weight. And if it's not that weight, then it's a $80,000 limit versus a $55,000 limit. Ugh. And then after that, they changed their mind. Okay, actually, it's $80,000 for the Model Y anyway. It's like constantly being updated, constantly fluctuating. So I try not to factor in the tax credit all too much, but um, that would support the idea that the vehicle is designed as a robo taxi first, but a vehicle to sell to customers second. Is if you just made it super undesirable, just not the very compelling. But it would still be kind of interesting for Tesla to make a super cheap car like that. That it's like, can you road trip with it? Yeah, you can. It's not great, but you could do it. Um, Cybertractor would be a neat idea. The Lambo Trattori of electrifying farming. I'm sad that you know about that because I thought I was the weirdo for knowing about the Lamborghini tractor, but I guess that's more well known than I realize. William says nobody would be okay with that. It won't be low. Yeah, I think you're exaggerating a bit. I think there's a lot of people that would probably be okay with it. There's actually Tesla used to sell a 60 kilowatt hour Model S. And I think it had like software limited range, but there were a bunch of people that bought it and it got a little over 100 miles on a charge, and it was something like $60,000 at $50,000. I know the market's changed a lot, but I just think the brand power Tesla has with the supercharging network access, I'm not saying most people would buy it. You know, I definitely wouldn't be jumping up and down like this is the greatest buy of all time, but I would say it's reasonable for getting a vehicle that can supercharge. The range hit for the price would be justified for a lot of people, especially people that don't do that much road tripping, which there's a decent amount. Like pretty much anybody who buys a Chevy Bolt, um, I feel like the Model B would kill the Bolt. Cyber van will be on the new platform. That would be cool. Cyber skateboard. Okay, now we're just getting lazy. What happened to Lucid? They have 2,000 cars sitting on the lot with a value of over $300 million and they're not shipping them. Seems very strange. Well, it's because no one's ordered them. There's not enough demand for them. That's the funny thing about Lucid is I think they are the only EV startup that doesn't have a demand problem. Rivian has a ton of orders and they can't fill them fast enough. Um, Tesla, of course, they can cut prices willy-nilly and make wait times grow whenever they feel like it, like they just did. They were like, okay, we caught up on demand, cut the prices. Now everybody's ordering again. Lucid, though, they're just pricing a very saturated market, and I think they're charging. It's not so much that they're charging way too much, because based on their financial statements, they're not making money on their cars that they're selling for 150 grand. But even if they cut their, like, it'd be easy for me to just say, well, cut their prices, just sell it for 90 grand instead of 150 grand. Okay, if they did that, they would still go bankrupt because they would be losing an insane amount of money on every car they sell. So I don't really know what their long-term plan is, but my recommendation is that they need to drastically change their product strategy. You cannot just say we're going to sell luxury sedans for 150 grand and that's our business strategy, because clearly it's not working. Especially when their main focus is on high range. Like every vehicle we make needs to have a 118 kilowatt hour battery pack in it. That's not going to work. Especially when Lucid's doing nothing about the charging network. Range is one part of the equation, but the charging network, I would argue, is much more important, especially after the 200-mile mark. And Lucid has done basically nothing when it comes to their charging network. They just say, well, our car charges fast. Use EA. Good luck. And then EA sucks. So a bunch of people bought. I've also seen Lucids depreciate in value the most in the used market. For a brand new company, you can get Dream Editions for like $40,000, $50,000 less than MSRP. because I think a lot of people bought them and they're just not selling. You know, that a lot of people bought them, realized they didn't want them anymore, preferred the Tesla for whatever, or preferred some other vehicle. Maybe they got fed up with EA, so they went back to their gas vehicle. I've heard that story many times. But supply and demand that's what impacts pricing, and I'm seeing the used Lucid prices go down quite a bit. So I feel like that's an indication that there's not a lot of demand for these things, and Lucid has definitely confirmed that through their earnings reports, listing how their reservation backlog has gone down faster than they have delivered vehicles. So that means that there's people canceling their orders. My battery is lithium iron phosphate. That's correct, Joe. Why does everyone talk about road trips, hotel stay required, not day trips, 5 hours driving round trip? What? Why does everyone talk about road trips? Well, because we're taking a trip on the road, not day trips. Well, usually in a day, day trips, you can still, it's just a mini road trip. I think you're getting just caught up on terminology, Elizabeth. Like, a lot of people can do a day trip without even stopping to charge, depending on how long your drive is. So, Jonathan says, started a new job and been missing so much tech. Cool to see you live while I charge up my Ioniq 5. Hey, cool, an Ioniq 5 owner. How's she charging? Where are you charging, Jonathan? Did you precondition the battery? Did you get that update? I hope it's working for you. But yeah, I think as more and more time goes on, people are going to start to see how range, in my view, okay, it has a slight impact on the road trip experience, but it has a way bigger impact on the price. And the impact on the price is much larger than that of the impact on the driving experience. And that's why it won't be prioritized as much. But Pixels, yeah. How long have I been live for? Almost 2 hours. Jeez. I got some other stuff to work on today, but I appreciate the questions. I appreciate you guys tuning in. So I'm going to sign off here, but I hope you have a good one. Take care all. Bye-bye.